Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of Zeke-ollege football. I'm your host with the most, Zeke Kransdorf, and I'm excited to bring you another lovely episode. Honestly, these episodes really make my week, and that's all thanks to all the wonderful listeners back at home and here on Bryant University's campus as well. So, first things first, I've been receiving some great support. Multiple people have told me that they enjoy the uh, live format of uh, last week's episode. It had a YouTube premiere. That was an accident. I didn't really, I didn't know what I was doing with that one. And well, I didn't mean for it to be a live premiere, but people liked the live format. Felt like they're sort of like viewing along, like you would with a more traditional radio show. So I'm gonna start doing that more. We'll have sort of live previews on YouTube as well. Also, if you haven't followed the YouTube channel already, that is Zeke-ollege football over on YouTube. Zekeollege, and then the word football over on YouTube, and then the Instagram, as you probably already know, if you're a longtime listener, Zeke dot OLLEGEFOOTBALL on Instagram. So feel free to DM me uh, if you feel so inclined. If you disagree with any of my opinions, if you want to add an opinion, if you want to be a guest on the show, anything of that sort, feel free to do so. That's also where I'll post the predictions as well. So, like a nice visual infographic of the predictions and what our topic will be per week. So, that being said, this week we're going to be talking about the American Athletic Conference. The American is a very interesting conference, typically because more often than not, they are the conference that will get a lot of national recognition from the Group of Five. They have some fairly recognizable names, but one of the biggest things about the American Conference is it's a very different looking conference than it looked a couple of years ago. Uh, a couple of years ago, it was dominated by teams like Cincinnati and UCF and SMU. Uh, you know, there are some teams that have remained sort of powerhouse staples in the American Conference, but those three teams that I mentioned, they're all in new places in 2024. UCF and Cincinnati moved to the Big 12 last year, and SMU is now a member of the ACC. So it's going to be a new look for the American Conference, but they did bring in a new member, a former FBS independent team, Army, the U.S. Army at West Point. They're coming in. They'll be joining the conference slate, uh, and it's fitting. They're in the same conference as their longtime rival, the Naval Academy, is as well. So, it's going to be a new look for the American Conference, but it's certainly going to be an exciting time to view some American Conference action here as well. Now, the American tends to get some good airtime, typically on like Thursdays and a couple Friday games as well. If you're looking for more of a during the week, um, you'll see their games on ESPN. So you will be able to see some American games if you have a traditional ESPN viewing experience. But let's start right off at the top with the newcomer, Army. So it's year 11 for Jeff Monken. Uh, and if the last name Monken sounds familiar, you're like, Monken, that sounds like Todd Monken for the Baltimore Ravens. Well, they are related. They're cousins. So Jeff Monken, he went 6-6 last year, but there was no bowl game for the Army. They got their sixth win of the season uh, in the Army Navy game. Pardon me, I have to lost a sneeze there. But yeah, so 6-6, they got their win in the Army Navy game. But they're looking to sort of build off of that. Bryson Daly, he's back at quarterback, and they have some consistency at the position, but really what they're trying to do is they're trying to just continue. They won the Army Navy game, like I mentioned last year. It was a close game towards the end, but you know they also won the Commander in Chief trophy. So when you win against two of your rivals, that's generally a pretty good sign. Um, so what Army's really looking for is they're looking for maybe not stasis, but they're looking for ways of sort of keeping up that momentum. And I think that Jeff Monken, he's a good coach, and their schedule, despite the fact that they are moving to a conference, should actually be a little easier than it was. So, it should be just a little bit easier because they were playing some very, very tough opponents when they were an independent. Coming up next, we're talking about Charlotte. Uh, Charlotte is a very interesting story. They were one of the newer teams in the FBS. Um, they didn't really make much noise in Conference USA before getting sort of poached over to the American Conference in the big move last year. It was Charlotte, FAU moved over, North Texas moved over, Rice moved over, UAB moved over. So there was a big mass exodus of Conference USA last year over to the American Conference. And Charlotte was one of those names where I was a little surprised that the American wanted them. They didn't, like I said, didn't really do much in Conference USA, but relatively large viewership and market share. They're connected to the Charlotte metropolitan area, so I guess in terms of TV viewership, that makes sense. Either way, they also have one of my favorite names for a coach, and eventually I'll do a special episode on the all-name team, and I think uh, this guy is who I'll probably have at the head coach position there. Year 2 for Biff Poggi. Uh, they were 3-9 last year in their first season in the American Conference. Now, they didn't really have much of a run game last year. It was pretty anemic at that position. So they're bringing in a couple transfers, C.J. Stokes and Cartevious Norton as well. But the most interesting thing about Charlotte is their quarterback position. Last year, you had Trexler Ivy at quarterback. He was a little inconsistent, still young, but a little inconsistent. So they go into the portal and they bring in Florida transfer Max Brown. And Brown actually looked pretty good in relief of Graham Mertz towards the end of the season when he got hurt. So it should be a pretty good get for Charlotte, and hopefully they're able to improve a little bit. Now let's talk about East Carolina. ECU, it's year 6 for Mike Houston. They were 2-10 last year. really just an extremely disappointing season for East Carolina. They'd come off two consecutive bowl games the previous 2 years. They did lose a lot of talent to the draft and graduation. Most notably, their longtime starting quarterback, Holton Allers. He went to the Seahawks. He's now going to be playing, I believe, in the UFL, which is going to be starting up soon, which is spring league football. But either way, 2-10, extremely disappointing season. Mike Houston is on the hot seat entering this season. So they really had to go out and make a change. Find something, some talent out there. And I think they did a pretty good job. A solid transfer portal haul for ECU, and really that was led by the addition of a couple quarterbacks. Um, so they're going to have a QB battle from two quarterbacks who both transferred in. First things first, Caton Hauser from Michigan State. Um, Hauser's a solid player. We saw him play for the Spartans. He was able to move the ball fairly well. And then Jake Garcia, he played for Miami for a little bit, transferred over to Mizzou, was not able to wrangle the starting job away from Brady Cook over there. And then finally transfers over to East Carolina, where he does have a shot at getting that starting role. Garcia, a highly touted player, strong arm. Same with Hauser. I like the talent that ECU brought in. I definitely think, and we'll get to this a little later in the show. Um, I think that they're making moves in the right direction. Whether or not that's enough for Houston to keep his job, that's up to the athletic department. I'm not in charge of that, but I think that's overall pretty good. They're on a better trajectory than they were heading into last season. Next up, we have Florida Atlantic. FAU has been one of those programs that's been known to hire fairly high profile coaches. Track record on that, so. Tom Herman in year number 2 at FAU. They he actually replaced another former like high profile coach in Willie Taggart over for the Owls. And I like Tom Herman as a coach. I think he was sort of written off a little unfairly at Texas. That being said, the expectations at FAU are a lot lower than they are at Texas. Uh, you know, Texas, one of those big national brands. Everyone expects everything year in, year out. So yeah, year number 2 for Herman. He went 4-8 last year, and both of his top quarterbacks left in the transfer portal. So you start to see a pattern here. A lot of talented players leaving in essentially college football free agency. So kind of left without a lot of options at quarterback. Had to run into the transfer portal himself and grab one. Picked up Cam Francher. Or Cam Francher over from Marshall. But yeah, the top two quarterbacks, Daniel Richardson, known for his time at Central Michigan, and Casey Thompson, who is known mostly for his time at Texas. Uh, he was the starter in 2021 at Texas, went over and played for Nebraska in 2022. 2023 plays for FAU, and now he's in the transfer portal yet again, and he's heading over to Oklahoma. I don't think that he'll be the starter over there. I think they're going to probably stick with Jackson Arnold. But you know, it's never a good sign when both of your top quarterbacks leave in the portal. So tough spot for Herman, but luckily able to get a solid quarterback in Franchier. We're going to skip around a little bit here. Let's talk about USF. So USF, one of those sort of breakout stories last year. They were abysmal, to say the least, over the last couple years. And then in comes Alex Golesh. They go 7-6 last year with a freshman quarterback, and demolish Syracuse in a bowl game. Byram Brown, that freshman quarterback, he is back at USF for his second year. And then he was also really a do-it-all player. So if you're thinking of the University of South Florida, if you're thinking of the USF Bowls, really what you got to think about is you have to think about Byram Brown. He was their leading passer and their leading rusher. So if you're expecting big things for USF, Byram Brown has to be sort of the top priority there. Make sure to watch out for him. Now let's talk about UAB for a little bit. UAB also went the route of FAU here, hiring a high-profile coach, but in a different way. He was a former player in the NFL, former Super Bowl winning quarterback. It's Trent Dilfer at UAB. He went 4-8 in his first season in the American Conference. Jacob Zeno was his quarterback. He's coming back. But really, we're going to have to touch on an unfortunate story, and a story that, quite frankly, disgusts me when we're talking about this UAB offseason. And it revolves around a player named Jalen Kitna. So Jalen Kitna, son of John Kitna, former NFL quarterback, he was on the Florida Gators last year before he was dismissed from that team. And, obviously, I'm going to, say outright, court of law takes priority over the court of opinion. That being said, I'm all of this is alleged, but he did get kicked off the team for what I'm going to be discussing here. So he was dismissed from Florida on charges of possession of child pornography. And if you're disgusted, you have every right to be. But UAB apparently did an investigation into the case, and they're saying that they didn't find anything, so they're bringing him into the team. I don't know how I feel about that move. It's just the charges were dropped, and he served probation, but I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that move there. And it might be just another example of people sort of getting bailed out based on being an athlete, and it's just an unfortunate situation, really. You know, hopefully, you know, I hope that people can change. Hopefully, this is a situation where he realizes, uh, his wrongdoing and truly repents. But most likely not going to be the starting quarterback over at UAB this upcoming season. It's probably going to be Jacob Zeno. Whew. All right, let's talk about a more positive uh, story. We're going to talk about UTSA. So it's year 5 for Jeff Traylor. Traylor 9-4 last season. They're a pretty good team typically year in year out. UTSA under Jeff Traylor has been putting talent after talent into the league. Now, Frank Harris, their longtime starting quarterback, he moves on. So now it's the Owen McCown show. Owen McCown, son of Josh McCown. Again, we're starting to see a lot of sons of former players and stuff like that in college football, really making a lot of people feel old. Because yes, Josh McCown's son playing college football makes me feel a little old. But the biggest sort of move that they made during the offseason was bringing a former 5-star defensive back named Denver Harris. So he initially committed to Texas A&M, got kicked off of that team, went to LSU, and didn't really mesh well at LSU. Got into not he just didn't really fit in all that well. So he enters the transfer portal, and now at stop number 3, hoping to finally find his footing and live up to that 5-star potential. So certainly a player to look out for at UTSA. Now I'm just going to quickly touch on Tulsa. It's year 2 for Kevin Wilson. They were 4-8 last year. You got Cardell Williams back at quarterback. But really, when I looked at Tulsa, they didn't really do much. Nothing really impactful in recruiting. No major losses in the transfer portal. They had a fair amount of people transfer out, but nothing, really all that significant. And then no major additions in the transfer portal either. So not only did they not lose anyone all that important, they didn't really gain anyone all that important either. So just going to be a relatively stagnant team. I don't see a lot of improvement there, but I also don't see a huge drop off either. Now let's touch on Memphis. So it's year 5 for Ryan Silverfield. They're 10-3 last year. And it's not controversial to say that Memphis is going to be one of the top players in the American Conference this year. They were just barely outside of the conference title game last year. And they went to the Liberty Bowl instead and beat a pretty good Iowa State team in the Liberty Bowl. So, most of the Tigers' major pieces are back for this year, first year of the 12-team playoff, hoping to be one of the group of 5 teams that makes the 12-team playoff. You have Seth Hennigan, who's back again at quarterback. He's been starting for a while since he was a freshman. You have Rock Taylor back at wide receiver. Just an overall pretty good team with a lot of consistency there. So Memphis, absolutely a team to look out for here in the American Conference. Now we touched on Army. Now we'll touch on Navy. Year two for Brian Newberry. They went 5-7 last year. Again, 5-6 going into the Army Navy game. They did lose that one. So it's going to be either Blake Horvath or Braxton Woodson at quarterback, most likely. Those are the two players with the most experience on the roster that have started or have at least had playing time. Their starting quarterback last year, Ty Lavatai, he graduated. Uh, so, again, a lot. Just to fill in a little bit of behind the scenes look here. I'll be honest, it is not easy to find information on players in the military schools. A lot of that is sort of kept sort of not under lock and key per se, but it's sort of kept a little hush hush. But yeah, Ty Lavatai and Xavier Arline, the top two quarterbacks for the midshipmen of Navy, both graduated. So going to be someone new coming in. And really, they're looking to win the Commander-in-Chief trophy. That for all the military schools, for all the service schools, that's what the goal is: win the Commander-in-Chief trophy, and beat your rivals. Navy has not held that trophy since 2019, so they're trying to get back to those heights and capture the trophy once again. Now, North Texas. It's year two for Eric Morris. They were 5-7 last year. Chandler Morris transferred in from TCU. He'll be playing quarterback for the North Texas Mean Green. But their top wideout, Jamoy Macklin, who I believe is the cousin of Jeremy Macklin, former Missouri wide receiver, former Philadelphia Eagles wide receiver. He's transferring out. He's transferring over to the Kentucky Wildcats instead. But should be a solid North Texas team. We'll keep on going. It's Rice time. Year 7 for Mike Bloomgren. They went 6-7 last year. They did make a bowl game, lost to Texas State. And they're going to have a quarterback battle there, which I'll touch on in a little bit. But they lost their top wide receiver, Luke McCaffrey, Christian McCaffrey's younger brother. He's going to the NFL draft. But yeah, quarterback battle between last year's starter or last year's backup turn starter, AJ Padgett, versus Kurt Warner's son, EJ Warner. Now you might be wondering, I thought EJ Warner was playing for Temple. Well, let's touch on Temple. Back-to-back, they back-to-back 3 and 9 years for Stan Drayton over at Temple. And they did lose EJ Warner in the portal in conference over to Rice. So Warner trying to beat out Padgett for that Rice quarterback job. It was a job previously held last year by JT Daniels, who is another sort of college quarterback who bounced around from stop to stop. But yeah, now for Temple, the Owls will either be starting Clifton McDowell or Evan Simon. I'll be honest, not to no disservice to any of these players, but Temple is one of those teams that is very consistent, and their consistency is not consistently good. So I'm not optimistic for Temple. They went 3 and 9 for the past 2 years, but that was with a better quarterback at the helm. And then we're going to finish off this little preview section with Tulane. Now, Tulane went 11-3 last year under Willie Fritz, but Fritz is gone. Fritz left to coach at Houston, replaced Dana Holgerson over there. So, who do they get? But they get one of the top group of 5 coaches to come coach for them. They get John Summerall coming over from Troy. So it's going to be year 1 for Summerall. Tulane is a team in transition. Their top quarterback for the past 4 years, Michael Pratt, he's graduating, going on to the NFL draft as well. But they've done some work in the transfer portal as well. Ty Thompson, another high-profile quarterback coming over from Oregon. And then Mario Williams, the USC wide receiver, is also going to be coming over, so expect them to make a big impact. So a lot of teams here in the American Conference, but no teams that I think will really be truly. A lot of the teams in the American Conference are they're on a similar playing field. That being said, I do still think that there is a couple major players here. So I would expect Memphis, Tulane, and to an extent UTSA to be your big 3 teams to look out for. But enough dilly-dallying there. Let's get to the predictions part of the show. First things first, starting off with the U.S. Army. So week 1, and just to let you guys know, the schedule for the American Conference came out on February 29th. So I do actually have access to the week-by-week schedule. I know that the MAC and the Sun Belt did not have their schedules out at the time. So thank you for bearing with me with those, doing the home games and away games. I did what I had to do. But yes. So Army, starting off week 1, they're facing Lehigh. I think they'll win that one. And then they're traveling at FAU. I think they get the win there as well. They have a bye week in week 3 before hosting Rice. I think they lose to Rice before going on the road, beating Temple, and beating Tulsa on the road as well. I think they lose to UAB in week 7. I think they beat East Carolina in week 8. Week 9, they have another bye week before losing at home to Air Force. I think they'll beat North Texas on the road, have a bye week, lose in a neutral siter to Notre Dame, then win against UTSA at home, and then in the Army-Navy game, I think that they will win that one again. So overall, I see an 8-4 record for Army, 6-2 in conference. Now for Charlotte, they start off the season hosting James Madison. I think that's a loss. They travel on the road to North Carolina. I think that's a loss. I think they beat Gardner-Webb at home before losing to Indiana on the road and losing to Rice on the road. I think they'll beat East Carolina before their bye week. I think they'll lose to Navy on the road, lose to Memphis on the road, lose to Tulane at home before another bye week. And I think they will beat USF, beat FAU, and beat UAB, little 3-game win streak to end the season. going 5-7 and 4-4 in conference. Now, next up, we have East Carolina. Like I mentioned, East Carolina, one of those teams that I did see some improvement for. Starting off, I think they beat Norfolk State. I think they beat Old Dominion on the road. I think they lose to App State and lose to Liberty. Uh, Now, week 5, I think they beat UTSA at home. I think they lose to Charlotte on the road. They have a bye week. I think they lose to Army. I think they beat Temple. Another bye week. Lose to FAU. Beat Tulsa on the road. Beat North Texas on the road. And lose to Navy. So I see ECU going 6-6 and 4-4 in conference. And I see them making a bowl game. Perhaps under Mike Houston still. We'll see whether or not he gets fired, depending on how short is the leash there. That's the real question. Now, Florida Atlantic. I see them losing to Michigan State on the road. I see them losing to Army, losing to FIU before beating UConn on the road and beating Wagner at home. A bye week followed by a loss to North Texas at home, a loss to UTSA on the road, another bye week, loss to USF at home before beating East Carolina on the road, beating Temple on the road, a home loss to Charlotte, followed by a road victory against Tulsa to finish the season 5-7 and 3-5 in conference. Now let's talk about Memphis. I mean, Memphis, like I said, one of those teams really looking to compete in the 12-team playoffs. And with this schedule, I think they have a shot. They start off against North Alabama. I think they win that one. I think they beat Troy, lose to Florida State on the road before beating Navy on the road and beating Middle Tennessee at home. After their bye week, I think they beat USF on the road, beat North Texas at home, beat Charlotte at home, beat UTSA on the road, beat Rice at home, beat UAB at home before another bye week, and then they play Tulane on the road. Now, this one is a huge matchup in the American Conference, and I think that this matchup will really be the determining factor for which team will make the 12-team college football playoff. I really do. I think that whoever wins this one will most likely make the 12-team playoff, and if they lose this one, they're most likely out of it. So I see Memphis beating Tulane on the road here, going 11-1 and 8-0 in conference. So I think that's a huge season for Memphis, but I don't see that as really out of the ordinary. I think they're a great program and really could be making the step forward here this year. Now, next up, we have Navy. Beating Bucknell, beating Temple before a bye week, and then losing to Memphis. Then they go on the road at UAB, pick up a win there before losing on the road to Air Force. Another bye week, and then they will beat Charlotte, lose to Notre Dame at a neutral site, lose to Rice on the road, lose to USF on the road, lose to Tulane at home. Another bye week, they'll beat East Carolina, and they will lose the Army-Navy game. So I see them going 5-7, 4-4 in conference. Interesting little factoid there. First 4 weeks of the season, no road games for the U.S. Naval Academy. Now, North Texas. I see them losing at South Alabama before beating Stephen F. Austin, losing on the road at Texas Tech, and losing to Wyoming I see them beating Tulsa, and then after their bye week, going on the road and beating Florida Atlantic, losing to Memphis on the road, losing to Tulane, another bye week, loss to Army, loss at UTSA, loss to East Carolina, and a win at Temple to go 4-8 and 3-5 in conference play. So a bit of a disappointing season there for North Texas, but you're going to be losing a lot when you lose a wideout like Jamoy Macklin. I like Chandler Morris as a group of five quarterback, but if you look at some of the rest of the team, now one thing to note about the American Conference, while I'm at it, in a way, it's a little similar to how the Big 12 used to be seen. Um, you'll see a lot of high scores, but you won't see a lot of defense. So, in order to properly, pick and choose, you have to sort of go off of offensive firepower rather than defensive firepower. There are teams in this conference with good defense as well. They're just a little bit fewer and far between. Um, teams like Tulane has an okay defense. Memphis has a pretty solid defense. But a lot of these teams, they focus a lot more on offensive output. Um, a college football podcast that I listen to called The Solid Verbal has this word to describe teams like this. They call them half teams, where they only really play one half of the ball. Um, the greatest example of a half team is Iowa. They don't play any offense, they only play defense. Uh, Most of the American Conference is like the anti-Iowa. They only play offense, don't really prioritize defense. So not as it's just a bit of a disappointing season for North Texas, but um, you know, 4-8, just a slight step back. Um, Now up next we have Rice. They start the season playing playing host to Sam Houston. I think they win that one. I think they win against Texas Southern as well. They'll lose on the road at Houston, and they'll beat Army on the road as well. And I think they beat Charlotte as well before their bye week. After their bye week, I think they lose to UTSA at home, lose on the road at Tulane. I think they beat UConn. I think they beat Navy. Uh, I think they lose to Memphis, have another bye week before losing at UAB and losing to USF. I see them going 6-6, 3-5 in conference play. Now we have Temple. I am not high on Temple. I do not think that Temple will be a very good team. And that's saying a lot because they were 3-9 last year. I think they'll be a little bit worse. Loss at Oklahoma, loss at Navy, loss against Coastal Carolina, loss against Utah State, loss against Army. I think they win at UConn before their bye week, and they win against Tulsa at home after their bye week. I think they lose at East Carolina before another bye, lose at Tulane, lose at home to FAU, lose at UTSA, and lose to North Texas to finish off the season going 2-10 and 1-7 in conference play. So not a great season for Temple, but at the same time, you lose a talented quarterback to a conference rival. It's not looking good for you. Next up, we have Tulane. Now, the biggest downside for Tulane is they have a tough out of conference schedule. So they start off against Southeastern. I think they win that one. It's an FCS school. I think they're going to get the win there. But they host Kansas State. I think that's a loss. And then they travel on the road to Norman, Oklahoma to face the Sooners. I think they lose that one as well. I think they beat Louisiana, the Ragin' Cajuns, on the road. I think they beat USF. I think they beat UAB, have a bye week after the bye. They beat Rice, beat North Texas on the road, beat Charlotte on the road, beat Temple, beat Navy on the road before their bye week and their huge game against Memphis. Like I said in the Memphis part of the preview, I think that Memphis will win that game. Um, but even still, a 9-3 season in year one for John Summerall, 7-1 in conference is nothing to sneeze at. After that, let's talk about Tulsa. Northwestern State to start off the season. I think that's a win. Losses at Arkansas State and then hosting Oklahoma State before going on the road and beating Louisiana Tech. I think they lose at North Texas. I think they lose to Army before their bye week. After the bye, I think they lose at Temple, lose to UTSA. They'll win at UAB, lose at home to East Carolina, lose on the road to USF, and lose at home to FAU to finish 3-9, 1-7 in conference as well. Next up, we have UAB. They start off the season against Alcorn State. I see that as a victory. I see them beating ULM as well. I think that they will lose at Arkansas before their bye week. They're going to lose to Navy, lose to Tulane, beat Army on the road, lose to USF on the road for another bye, and then lose games against Tulsa, UConn, and on the road at Memphis before a victory against Rice and a loss against Charlotte to end the season, going 4-8, 2-6 in conference play. Now, UTSA, I see them beating Kennesaw State. I see them beating Texas State on the road. I see them losing to the University of Texas, and then beating Houston Christian. I see them losing to East Carolina, beating Rice on the road, beating FAU, beating Tulsa on the road, losing to Memphis before another bye week, and then beating North Texas, beating Temple, and losing to Army to end the season 8-4 and 5-3 in conference. And then finally, USF. I see them beating Bethune-Cookman before losing at Alabama, beating Southern Miss on the road before losing a home game to Miami. Miami, Florida. I should clarify there. I see them losing on the road to Tulane before a bye week, losing at home to Memphis after the bye, beating UAB, and then after their second bye week, going on the road, beating FAU, beating Navy, losing to Charlotte on the road before beating Tulsa and beating Rice on the road, finishing 7-5 and 5-3 in conference play. So, in terms of a championship game, it would most likely be a Memphis-Tulane rematch. So it would be them playing in the final game of the season and then matching up yet again in the title game. And I think that's going to be a fantastic little series. So an interesting time to look at the American Conference. And honestly, it should be an exciting conference to watch, to look at. But yeah, that is all I have prepared. If you disagree for some reason with my takes, feel free to let me know in the comment section below, or over Instagram, over at ZEKE.OLLEGEFOOTBALL on Instagram, or Zeke-ollege football over on YouTube as well. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.